full-time MMA? Nothing else?
My life, man, yeah.
Or is this full-time MMA now?
I love full-time MMA right now.
Back to the daily grind. Thanks for checking out the channel. Make sure to subscribe if you're new and hook your boy up with a like if you're not a baby back bagel biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time
MMA.
First off, I gotta start out with the big shout out to Gulik702. He said, love the channel, would you mind doing a top 5 UFC's most underrated list? And my answer is, I probably would have did that if you, I know not probably, I would have did that if you would have just emailed me with no donation. But still, much appreciated, so let's get straight to it. It's coming in at number 5. I got Kelvin Gastelum. He's 14-3 with 1 no contest, which was actually a win, so he's 15-3. It was overturned because he was smoking weed 24 hours before or 24 hours after his fight, so it got overturned. That was his victory over Vitor Belfort, and it was a round 1 knockout, performance of the night, but it was overturned because he was smoking weed. So I'm thinking, smoking weed, that's a lot different than a fucking steroid. So to me, you could say he's 15-3. So Kelvin Gastelum, he's only 25 years old, and he's already got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 fights in the UFC. 12 out of Kelvin Gastelum's 15 fights are in the UFC. He's already fought top level competition. Even he fought Tyron Woodley. He lost that fight. It was a split decision, but that's one of the fights he missed weight at welterweight, which forced Dana White to move him. The last straw was when he missed weight versus Donald Cerrone, and the fight was canceled. And so, his record, his recent record looks kind of bad at the top just because he's fighting at welterweight. Seen in his last fight versus Chris Weidman, he might just be a little too small for the division. And I do believe he could make welterweight with just the discipline, but in the last embedded that we've seen, he showed, his family a little bit, and, his mom looked like she made some really good food. And he said, I'm a mama's boy, so I have to say yes to her food, but I do think he could tone it down, you know what I'm saying? I think he could make it, but he's going to have to kind of do what Dana White says. He's been a guy that doesn't really seem like he has much say-so in his career. He does, but, he always refers to Dana White more as like boss, and I got to do whatever the UFC says type shit. But it's because he's missed weight more than twice at welterweight. So I think maybe soon he'll be able to move back down to welterweight if he loses one more fight at middleweight. But it doesn't help that he's had some success at 185 pounds, which is why the UFC is like, hey, you look good here. It's easier for you to make the weight. You should stay here. But after his last loss versus Chris Weidman, he's scheduled to face Anderson Silva at UFC Fight Night. It might be in Brazil, or let me see exactly when it is. Either way, he's scheduled to fight Anderson Silva coming up on November 25th. And if he loses that fight, I think he can go back down to welterweight because he's still got a lot of time on his hands, get a nutritionist on deck. But if he wins that fight, he might stay at middleweight. I think win or lose, he should go down to welterweight. The UFC's talking about adding 175, a weight class in between every 10 pounds. Kelvin Gastelum might fuck around and be the champion at 175 pounds. But I think a little discipline, he could make that 170-pound limit because he's a smaller middleweight. So he's coming in at number 5 on my most underrated list, and he's fought a lot of big names now. That's why he's starting to be on people's radar. Whenever I think under the radar, I kind of think people that aren't really on radar as much as they should be, or it's because they're young in their career, so not many people know about them. So Kelvin Gastelum coming in at number 5. Coming in at number 4, we've got Kamaru Usman, 11-1. He's 30 years old, so he started a little later than some of these guys, but he's a fucking dominant force in the welterweight division, and he's only ranked 11, which is definitely a slight in my opinion. He's better than rank 11. You look at the top 10 guys, man, he's probably deserves to be in the top 5 if he could fight some of those guys. He definitely needs to fight someone in the top 10 to prove what I'm saying and what he's been saying. But if you just look at his history in the UFC, in his full history, he's got 6 fights in the UFC, all wins, undefeated in the UFC. And look at his stats. He outstrikes all of his opponent, and he always lands more takedowns than his opponent, unless it's a stalemate in takedowns, as in his last fight, which he knocked the guy out before he was able to take him down. So every other fight, he scored more takedowns than his opponent and outstruck his opponents, and he's still only ranked number 11. And I think he'd have success against a lot of these guys. He's called out a lot of these top welterweights. They don't want the fight. He's called him out by name. Damian Maia is just one of the guys he was talking about on the MMA Hour. He's called out a lot of these dudes. Neil Magny, he's saying. I mean, there's a lot of guys Kamaru Usman's been trying to get the fight with. It's kind of like the who was just having this? It's kind of like Kevin Lee a little bit. Kevin Lee's been calling out everybody. Kevin Lee's ranked number 7, and everybody's saying, "Oh, how do you not get how is he getting the title fight? He's only ranked number 7." Well, Kevin Lee's literally called out the first, second, third, fourth, fifth ranked guys, and no one's saying yes to the fight. So how's he gonna move up rankings if those guys don't want to fight him? It's kind of this, the same thing with Kamaru Usman. But since he got an exciting finish in his last fight, it's looking like he might be fighting somebody soon. Whether it be Mike Perry, whether it be Neil Magny, Kamaru Usman, people are starting to get behind him a little bit. He's starting to get a little bit on people's radar. And when you're actually on people's radar, you kind of get the big fights. Sometimes, in the case of Kamaru Usman, I think that's the case. I do believe he'll get he's ranked 11, so he's either going to fight what he said he wants is to either fight somebody the fans care about or a higher ranked opponent than him. So if he doesn't fight Mike Perry next, I definitely believe his next opponent will be in the top 10. And hey, it's bigger and brighter things from there for Kamaru Usman coming in at number 4. Number 3, we got Darren Till. He's unranked. Whoo, and that is crazy because Darren Till is a beast. I mean, he hasn't fought any opponents in the top 15 yet, but he is scheduled to fight Donald Cerrone. At UFC Fight Night. It's 1 week after UFC 216. It's in Poland, I believe. Darren Till's fighting Donald Cerrone. Darren Till is undefeated. He's a fucking beast, man. I've watched all of his UFC fights on Fight Pass. He's a very confident fighter. He's a well-rounded fighter. He's got great Muay Thai, great striking. He's been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Brazil. I heard Dan Hardy say in one of his fights. He's from Liverpool, England. Man, Darren Till is a beast. Once he beats Donald Cerrone, which I'm predicting to happen, if he beats Donald Cerrone, after he fights Donald Cerrone, I think he's going to be on everybody's radar. There's no way Donald Cerrone just walks through Darren Till, and I don't know. Darren Till, man, if you've watched his fights, he's fought 4 times in the UFC, I believe, and he's 3-0-1, but he's so confident in his fights, and he's very young, 24, but they said he's been knocking out grown men since he was 16. I think he's one of the brightest prospects in the UFC, let alone one of the most underrated fighters. He got on my radar, man, whenever he got scheduled to fight Donald Cerrone. I didn't know much about him until then. And so that put him on my radar, and I think if he comes out here and beats Donald Cerrone, it skyrockets him into the top 10. Donald Cerrone's, I believe, ranked number 6. Darren Till's unranked. If you beat the ranked 6 guy, that makes you take his place, right? And then Donald Cerrone is on a 2-fight losing streak. He got knocked out twice in the same fight versus Jorge Masvidal. That was definitely some damage. Jorge Masvidal is one of the best fighters in the welterweight division, though. Donald Cerrone then returned to fight Robbie Lawler, where he lost a decision there. Some people had Donald Cerrone winning that fight, but it is what it is. He's going to be fighting Darren Till in 2 weeks from now, and it's going to be a fucking great fight. And if you don't know who Darren Till is, now you know, nigga. Next, let's move to number 2. Kevin Lee. I know some people don't think he's underrated, and whenever I think of underrated, I do think of people that are not really on people's radar. And that doesn't really fit Kevin Lee because I do think now he's on a lot of people's radar, but I think he's underrated. I think he gets a lot of hate, and maybe that's not because he's underrated, but I don't know, because, like my boy Joe Martin, he came and he was giving me shit. He said, hey, I love the channel, but Kevin Lee, you're crazy if you think he's on Tony Ferguson's level. I don't think I'm crazy to think he's on Tony Ferguson's level. I only give Kevin Lee a 40% chance of winning the fight, but that's more than a lot of you guys. Some of you guys think he's got like a fucking 5% chance, like he's a slouch out here, and that's not the case at all. Kevin Lee, like Kelvin Gastelum, is very young, 25 years old, a lot of UFC experience, And one thing you have to say about these guys, I mean, even if the guys they aren't fighting in the UFC aren't ranked in the top 15, it doesn't mean these guys that they're fighting are slouches if they're in the UFC. It's not like they built their record up outside of the UFC and, now they're in here and they've only got a couple fights. Kind of like Justin Gaethje a little bit. Justin Gaethje, he's only got one fight in the UFC, and it was versus Michael Johnson, and he's in like the top 5. Well, Kevin Lee's not even in the top 5, and he's got fucking like 12 out of 16 fights or something in the UFC, and he's only lost 2 of them, and one of them was his UFC debut. So, I mean, this isn't a rule, but if you just went off everybody's record and scratched out their UFC debut, I mean, and no one does that, but I mean, I'm just thinking about it. Your UFC debut, octagon jitters, fucking all that shit, blah, blah, blah. He's only lost 1 time outside of his UFC debut, and he's wanted that rematch in his UFC debut. It's not like the dude who beat him just outclassed him. It was Ali Quinta, and it was a decision. And if you know the history of Ali Quinta, man, he gets pretty generous with some of those decisions. Some of his decisions are pretty generous. Now, he came out here and knocked out Diego Sanchez in his last fight. But since then, he hasn't really, you know what I'm saying? He definitely isn't really talking much about the Kevin Lee rematch. Ali Quinta, he's going to sell real estate, I think, until he gets the right fight. But this isn't about Ali Quinta. Kevin Lee, well, that's one of his only losses. The only other loss was a knockout by a guy that was a Brazilian black belt, which is Tony Ferguson's throwing in his face. But Kevin Lee was walking that guy down, really, in that fight until he got knocked out. And anybody can get clipped. I mean, maybe one of Kevin Lee's weaknesses might be his chin. I've watched, like, a lot of his fights in the UFC on Fight Pass. And it seems like sometimes when he gets clipped, he loses his legs a little bit, but he always recovers and he gets a really nice takedown off of that. But versus the guy he got knocked out by, wasn't able to recover. The guy swarmed him and the ref called it. I mean, maybe you can say it was a little early or whatever, but that was his only other loss, period, not even just in the UFC. So even though Kevin Lee, if he beats Tony Ferguson, he's completely off of this list on everybody's radar, not underrated. Because another meaning of underrated is people that I think are better than people give them credit for. And I think Kevin Lee falls into that. I think the Michael Chiesa victory really added to Kevin Lee's on people's radar. But with the controversial stoppage, a lot of people still didn't give him credit. A lot of people feel like he didn't really earn that win versus Michael Chiesa, which is kind of bullshit, honestly. So Kevin Lee, he's on I believe a 4 or 5 fight win streak with a 3 or 5 fight finishing streak. I'm pretty sure it's a 4 fight win streak, and all 3 of his last wins are submissions. So Kevin Lee, you might not think he's underrated, but he's definitely, I think he is. So, and he's got a fight coming up versus Tony Ferguson next week at UFC 216. I mean, the co-main event, Demetrius Johnson, Ray Borg. You got Derek Lewis, Fabricio Verdum on the card. Beneil Dariush, Evan Dunham. Gonna be a motherfucking great pay-per-view. Can't wait for UFC 216. And if Kevin Lee wins, he's definitely not gonna be on this list after that. Number 1 most underrated fighter in the UFC today, in my motherfreaking opinion, is Jimmy Rivera. Let's fucking go, El Terror. 21-1, and his only loss was his very first fight. And he's on like a 20-fight winning streak. He's beat some of the best. He's got a lot of UFC experience. He's beat Uriah Faber, Jimmy Rivera, Yuri Alcantara, Pedro Munoz, Marcus Brimage. Dude, like, everybody's, like, knocked out that dude, Marcus Brimage, bro. Like, Cody Garbrandt, Conor McGregor, Jimmy Rivera. Like, a lot of these stars in the UFC have that dude on their highlight. It's pretty hilarious. But I mean, Jimmy Rivera, 20-fight winning streak. He's like the dark horse, bro. I'm glad he gets to fight Dominic Cruz. I'm not going to say once, but if he's able to win that fight versus Dominic Cruz, he will be on everybody's radar, and he will definitely be the next person to fight for the title, unless Cody Garbrandt or TJ Dillashaw, who fight at UFC 217, want to move down and fight Mighty Mouse. But I think Jimmy Rivera is a guy that if he's got the number 1 contender spot, he'll defend it. He'll fight another top 5 contender because I think he might beat him. I think Jimmy Rivera could be. I mean, we don't know because we haven't seen him fight TJ Dillashaw, Dominic Cruz, or Cody Garbrandt. But I think he's probably better than everybody else in the division, maybe. I can't think of everybody off the top of my head. But Jimmy Rivera, man, is a force to be reckoned with. A lot of guys don't want to fight him. A lot of guys don't mention his name when they talk about bantamweight contenders, when they call people out. You never really hear people mention Jimmy Rivera. I don't think they want no smoke with El Terror. And Jimmy Rivera is only 28 years old, which is very young because he's so good. I mean, I don't know. Jimmy Rivera, to me, is definitely the most underrated fighter in the UFC. He's on a lot of people. He got on my radar whenever he fought Uriah Faber. That's when I did the research and everything. Then he fought Thomas Almeida, came out there and beat him as well. A unanimous decision, and I don't know. I definitely don't think Dominic Cruz is straight avoiding him, but, it's one of those situations like Tony Ferguson and Kevin Lee where he was just saying, like, oh, you got to get some more experience before you earn a fight with me type shit, and he didn't really say that to Jimmy Rivera, but I'm just assuming that's what he was thinking because he did. Whenever he talked about his next fight, it was always really the TJ Dillashaw or the Cody Garbrandt rematch. He didn't really mention fighting Jimmy Rivera. I mean, he might have once or twice, but as I said, the fight is scheduled. Fucking Dominic Cruz versus Jimmy Rivera. I believe it's at UFC 219 on December 30th. I mean, we don't know who's all going to be on that card, but it's going to be a stacked card. I think Jimmy Rivera is going to get put on everybody's radar that day. UFC 219. Win or lose, it's going to be a great fight. Jimmy Rivera, El Terror, most underrated fighter in the UFC. I got work this whole week coming up, so I'm not going to be able to pump out as much content as I did today. But it's a daily grind. So make sure you hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button if you're new. It is what it is. Let the hitters know what the fuck you tap at in the comments. And once again, thanks to, what is your name, good sir? Gulick702 for the $10 don't know. Man. Hey, one thing I want to say about these shitty ass ads, I'm about to fuck around and turn these advertisements off. I know y'all, that's a great way. I mean, I know it's a way to support the channel by watching the ads, and I know y'all say that you watch them for me, but I don't even really want y'all to be bothered with those ads because I'm not getting no money off of it, man. AdSense has been playing me since the very first channel, man. I broke the threshold on the first channel. Shit got fucked up. I didn't get that money. Okay, that's fine. I make this fucking AdSense account for full-time MMA, and I don't get no goddamn, I get to the threshold, $200, and then they tell me, oh, you had a Quick Hits 2 AdSense, sorry, so I had to restart it, never got that $200, I'm fine, that's fine, I don't care about this AdSense money, I've never got it, so it's not really real to me yet, so I just broke the threshold again, over $100, and AdSense is talking about I haven't hit anything, but it still says money earned, $105, so since my ads have been reactivated, I broke the threshold, but it's not saying anything about how to add a payment option. I don't know. It's pretty stupid. So pretty much, I guess it's money in the bank. I mean, but I don't know. It's weird. I kind of just want to turn them off and say fuck it, because I don't know. Maybe not. I don't care. I just want to turn them off because there's no really need to bother you guys with them if I'm not really fucking, you know what I'm saying? Maybe people will hit subscribe if they don't have to fucking watch ads, you know what I'm saying? Because it's not like I'm getting anything from the ads, so maybe instead of fucking watching ads, people will just hit that subscribe button. I don't know. But it is what it is. I'm going to try and get out like one more video and then maybe get to bed for work. Or maybe I might get some more fucking news out. It is what it is, man. Let the hitters know what the fuck you tell me in the comments. I'm out.
Bye, Felicia.